One cold night, Marcus Reed thought he was just going on a simple blind date until his wealthy neighbor walked in, looked straight at him, and asked a question that made the entire room fall silent. "Do you even know who he really is?" That single moment didn't just end a date. It uncovered a past Marcus never thought mattered and pulled him into a world he never asked to be part of. What started as quiet embarrassment would soon turn into a life-changing revelation, where one act of kindness, done without witnesses, without reward, would come back in a way no one could have predicted. And before the night was over, Marcus would learn that sometimes the things we walk away from are the very things that find us again. The diner smelled like burnt coffee, butter, and something fried hours ago that still lingered in the air. It was the kind of place that never really changed. Same cracked vinyl booths, same humming neon sign in the window, same tired waitress refilling mugs without asking. Outside, the streetlights cast long yellow reflections on wet pavement, and a city bus groaned as it pulled away from the curb. Marcus Reed sat in the corner booth, hands folded around a ceramic mug that had already gone cold. He hadn't touched it in minutes, maybe longer. Time felt strange tonight, stretched thin, like something fragile that might snap if he moved too fast. Across from him sat Emily. She looked exactly like her profile picture, maybe even better. Clean lines, soft curls tucked behind one ear, a light sweater that looked expensive without trying too hard. She had a polite smile, the kind people wear when they're still deciding what they think about you. Marcus shifted slightly in his seat, adjusting the collar of his shirt. He had ironed it twice before leaving home, pressing each crease with careful precision like it mattered more than it probably did. It was the best shirt he owned. Navy blue, no stains, no tears, just worn enough to feel real, so, he said, clearing his throat, offering a small smile. "I guess this is kind of new for both of us, huh?" Emily gave a short laugh. "Yeah, my friend signed me up for it. Said I needed to stop hiding behind work." Marcus nodded. "Sounds like a good friend." "Or a pushy one," she said, glancing down at the menu even though she hadn't ordered anything else. He smiled again, softer this time. He wasn't good at this. Not anymore. Not after everything. But he had promised Lila he would try. She had stood in the doorway that evening, backpack still slung over one shoulder, grinning like she'd just solved a puzzle. "You deserve to meet someone, Dad." He had laughed it off at first, but she hadn't. And now here he was, trying. "So what do you do, Marcus?" Emily asked, finally looking up again. He hesitated, not because he didn't want to answer, but because he knew how answers changed things. "I work nights," he said, "at a community kitchen, and I pick up repair jobs during the day when I can." She blinked once. "Community kitchen, yeah," he said. "We serve meals, mostly to people who don't have a place to go." Emily nodded slowly. "That's nice." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. Marcus reached for his mug, took a sip of cold coffee, and tried not to notice the way her posture shifted just slightly, like she had leaned back an inch without meaning to. "I like fixing things," he added, almost instinctively. "Always have." "Like what?" "Anything, really. Appliances, chairs, sometimes cars if I have the tools." Another nod, another polite smile. Outside, a car drove past, headlights cutting through the window and across their table before disappearing again. Marcus opened his mouth to say something else, anything to keep the moment from slipping. But the bell above the diner door rang. It was a small sound, ordinary, but it changed everything. The conversation around them didn't stop all at once. It never does. It fades, like a room slowly becoming aware of something it doesn't understand yet. A shift, a presence. Marcus didn't turn right away. Emily did. Her eyes moved toward the door, and something in her expression changed. Not dramatically, not yet, just enough to register that someone had walked in who mattered. Marcus followed her gaze. Mrs. Whitmore stood just inside the entrance, brushing a few drops of rain from the sleeve of her coat. She moved with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't ask for attention. It expected it. Her heels clicked once against the tile as she stepped forward, and the waitress straightened almost immediately. "Evening, Mrs. Whitmore," the waitress said, voice just a little brighter than before. "Evening," she replied, not unkindly, but without warmth either. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He knew that voice. He had heard it from across a hedge, from behind a closed gate, from the other side of a street that divided two very different worlds. She lived up on Crestview Drive, the part of town where the sidewalks were clean and the houses had names instead of numbers. And somehow, she was here, in this diner, in this moment. Her eyes scanned the room, slow and deliberate. Not searching, observing. Then they stopped. On him. Marcus felt it before he fully registered it. The weight of her gaze, sharp and unmistakable. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. And something else, something colder. Emily shifted in her seat. "Do you know her?" she asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer, because Mrs. Whitmore was already walking toward them. Each step felt louder than it should have. The soft murmur of conversation around them faded into something distant, like sound underwater. A fork clinked against a plate somewhere. A chair scraped lightly across the floor. And then she was there, standing beside their table, looking down at them, at him, at Emily. For a second, no one spoke. Marcus felt his pulse in his throat. Emily straightened instinctively, brushing her hair back as if preparing for something she didn't understand yet. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes moved between them, slow, measured, deliberate, taking in the scene, the booth, the two half-finished coffees, the space between them. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, clear, sharp enough to cut through the entire room without rising. "Do you have any idea who he is?" The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed. Heavy. Final. Emily blinked, caught off guard. What?" Mrs. Whitmore didn't look at her again. Her gaze stayed fixed on Marcus, as if the question itself was already answered. Mark didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. For a brief, suspended moment, the entire diner seemed to hold still, like the world had leaned in to hear what came next. A man at the counter turned slightly in his seat. The waitress paused mid-step, coffee pot hovering in the air. Someone near the window lowered their voice to a whisper. And Emily? Emily looked at Marcus differently now. Not with curiosity, not with politeness, but with something sharper, something uncertain, something that hadn't been there 5 seconds ago. "What does that mean?" she asked slowly. Her voice no longer light. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it again, because he didn't know how to answer a question he hadn't expected to be asked. And across from him, Emily's expression shifted once more, this time not toward him, but away from him, as if she was already beginning to step back, even while sitting still. Mrs. Whitmore finally looked at her then. Just once, long enough to make the point. "You should ask him," she said. Then she turned and walked away, just like that. No explanation, no apology, no hesitation. Bell above the door rang again as she stepped back out into the night, the sound snapping the room back into motion. Conversations resumed, quieter now. The waitress exhaled and continued moving. A fork scraped against a plate. The world kept going, but nothing felt the same. Marcus sat there, hands still wrapped around his mug, staring at the space where she had just been. He could feel it, the shift, not just in the room, but in the person sitting across from him. Emily leaned back slightly, her fingers curling around the edge of the table. Marcus, she said slowly, carefully. What was that about? He looked up at her, and for the first time that night, he didn't know what she saw when she looked at him. Was it the man who fixed broken things, the father who tried his best, the stranger she had agreed to meet, or something else entirely? Something he didn't even know he was carrying. Outside, the rain picked up again, tapping softly against the window. Inside, the silence between them stretched wider than the table itself. And Marcus realized, whatever this night was supposed to be, it had just become something else. Something he couldn't control, something that was already slipping out of his hands, and across from him, Emily was already starting to pull away. Why would a woman like Mrs. Whitmore walk into a place like this, look straight at him, and say something like that? And more importantly, what did she think she knew about him that he didn't? Emily didn't answer right away. She just sat there, her fingers still resting on the edge of the table, her posture tighter now, more guarded. The warmth that had been there before, thin as it was, had drained out of her expression, replaced by something cautious. Evaluating. I think, she said slowly, her voice careful. You should probably explain. Marcus let out a quiet breath. He could feel the weight of every eye in the diner again, even though no one was openly staring anymore. People were pretending to go back to their meals, their conversations, their lives. But the moment had left a mark. You could feel it hanging in the air like smoke that hadn't cleared. I don't know what she meant, Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. I really don't. Emily tilted her head slightly, studying him. You don't? No. The answer came out simple, too simple. And maybe that was the problem, because Emily didn't look convinced. She leaned back further now, creating just a little more distance between them, as if space itself could help her think more clearly. She walked in here, Emily said, her tone sharpening just a little, looked straight at you, and said that like it meant something. Marcus nodded once. I know. So either she's wrong, Emily continued, or you're not telling me everything. Marcus swallowed, wanted to say something stronger, something definitive. But the truth was, he didn't know how to explain something he didn't understand himself. Mrs. Whitmore had always been distant, cold, the kind of person who saw people like him as part of the scenery, something to be managed, not engaged. They had never had a real conversation, not once. I'm not hiding anything, he said quietly. Emily watched him for a few seconds, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to read something between the lines. Then she glanced down at her phone, a small gesture, casual, but it landed heavier than anything she had said. She began, then stopped, shaking her head slightly. I don't like surprises like that. I get that, Marcus said. Do you? She asked, looking back up at him, because it didn't seem like you were surprised. That caught him off guard. I was, he said. I just didn't react the way you expected. Emily held his gaze for another moment. Then she reached for her purse, and that was when Marcus felt it. That quiet, unmistakable shift, the kind that didn't need words. You're he said. It wasn't a question. Emily hesitated, just briefly. I think I should. Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't try to stop her, didn't reach across the table, didn't argue, because something inside him already knew. This wasn't about one sentence anymore. It was about everything that came with it. Everything people assumed when they didn't know you. Everything they filled in with their own fears, their own stories. I had a nice time, Emily added, almost out of habit. Marcus gave a faint smile. Yeah, me too. It wasn't entirely a lie. She stood, adjusting her coat, smoothing it down like she needed something to steady herself. For a second, It looked like she might say something else, something real, but whatever it was, she swallowed it. "Take care, Marcus," she said. "You too." She turned and walked toward the door. The bell rang again as she stepped out into the night, the sound echoing just a little louder than before. Marcus stayed where he was. He didn't watch her leave. He just sat there, staring at the empty seat across from him, listening to the low hum of the diner settle back into its usual rhythm. The waitress approached slowly, coffee pot in hand. "You want a refill?" she asked gently. Marcus glanced at his mug, then back at her. "Sure," he said. She poured without saying anything else, the dark liquid filling the cup with a soft, steady sound. When she was done, she gave him a small nod, something quiet, something understanding, and moved on. Marcus wrapped his hands around the mug again. It was warm this time, but he didn't drink. He just sat there, replaying the moment over and over in his mind. The way Mrs. Whitmore had looked at him, the certainty in her voice, the question she hadn't really asked, but had made everyone else ask instead. "Do you have any idea who he is?" Marcus let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he muttered under his breath. "I'd like to know that too." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. No messages, no missed calls. Just the quiet glow of the screen reflecting back at him. For a second, he thought about calling it a night. Going home, pretending this whole thing hadn't happened. But something about the way Mrs. Whitmore had said those words, it didn't sit right. It wasn't just judgment. It was deliberate. Like she wanted something to happen. Like she had planned for it. Marcus pushed that thought aside. He stood, pulling a few bills from his wallet and placing them on the table. More than the check. He always left extra. Old habit. He grabbed his jacket, slipping it on as he walked toward the door. Outside, the air was colder than he expected. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, mist clinging to the streetlights and softening the edges of everything. Cars passed by in slow streaks of red and white, tires hissing against the wet pavement. Marcus stepped onto the sidewalk and paused. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing, listening, trying to shake the feeling that something had shifted in a way he couldn't quite see yet. He started walking. The diner sat on the edge of a neighborhood that never quite decided what it wanted to be. A few blocks in one direction, and the buildings got cleaner, taller, quieter. A few blocks the other way, and the sidewalks cracked, the lights flickered, and the city showed its wear. Marcus headed toward the latter, his side of town. The bus stop was a block away, a narrow shelter with a flickering overhead light and a bench that had seen better days. A couple of people stood there already, shoulders hunched against the damp air, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Marcus took a spot near the edge, hands in his pockets. He could still feel it. That question, that look, and underneath it all, something else. Something older, familiar. The feeling of being seen, but not understood, of being judged, without being known. A car slowed as it passed, headlights sweeping across the sidewalk. For a split second, Marcus thought it might stop, but it didn't. It kept going. He exhaled slowly, watching the taillights disappear down the street. The bus would be here soon. He'd go home. Lila would probably still be awake, pretending she hadn't stayed up waiting. He'd tell her it went fine, because that's what you did. You protected the people who believed in you, even when the world didn't. Marcus shifted his weight slightly, glancing down the road. The bus wasn't in sight yet, but something else was, a black sedan, parked just past the corner, engine running, lights off. He frowned slightly. It hadn't been there when he walked up, or maybe it had, and he just hadn't noticed. The window on the passenger side lowered just a fraction. Not enough to see inside clearly, just enough to suggest someone was watching. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. He straightened slightly, his eyes narrowing as he looked toward the car. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the window slid back up, the engine revved softly, and the car pulled away. Slow, deliberate, like it had seen enough. Marcus stood there watching it disappear into the night, the question pressing harder now than it had before. What did she think she knew about him? And why did it feel like someone else was starting to ask the same question? The bus turned the corner at the end of the street, its headlights cutting through the mist. Marcus didn't move right away. He just stood there a second longer, listening to the quiet, feeling the shift. Because whatever this was, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The bus doors folded open with a tired hiss, spilling warm air and dim fluorescent light onto the sidewalk. Marcus stepped inside, dropping a few crumpled bills into the fare box, his mind still fixed on the black sedan that had disappeared moments ago. He moved toward the back, taking a seat by the window. The glass was fogged slightly from the contrast between the cold outside and the stale heat inside. He wiped a small circle with his sleeve and stared out at the wet street as the bus lurched forward. The city slid past in streaks, storefronts closing for the night. A man pulling down a metal gate. A couple arguing quietly under a flickering street lamp. Everything looked the same as it always did. But Marcus didn't feel the same. That car, that feeling. It sat with him now, heavier than the words in the diner, because words could be dismissed, misunderstood, twisted, but being watched, that meant intention. He leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the hum of the engine, the soft murmur of voices around him. Somewhere near the front, a child coughed. Someone shifted a bag on the floor. The bus driver cleared his throat over the intercom. Normal sounds, ordinary, and yet Marcus couldn't shake the sense that something had shifted just beneath the surface. He opened his eyes again. Outside, the streets grew darker as the bus moved deeper into his neighborhood. The buildings got smaller, older. Paint chipped away from walls. Porch lights flickered or didn't turn on at all. Home, the bus slowed, then stopped with a jolt. Marcus stood, steadying himself with one hand on the pole, and stepped off into the damp night air. The drizzle had stopped, leaving the ground slick and shining under the streetlights. He pulled his jacket tighter around him and started walking. His apartment building stood halfway down the block, a narrow two-story structure wedged between a closed laundromat and a corner store that kept its lights on all night. The neon sign in the window buzzed faintly, casting a soft blue glow across the sidewalk. Marcus climbed the steps, the wood creaking under his weight, and reached for the door. Before he could open it, "Dad?" The voice stopped him. He turned. Lila stood just inside the hallway, framed by the dim yellow light overhead. She wore oversized socks that didn't quite match and one of his old hoodies, the sleeves hanging past her hands. Her hair was pulled back into a loose braid that had already started to come undone. She wasn't supposed to be awake. "What are you doing up?" Marcus asked, pushing the door open and stepping inside. She shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. "I heard the bus." Marcus gave a small smile. "That doesn't mean you stay up waiting." "I wasn't waiting," she said quickly. Then, after a beat, "Okay, maybe a little." He closed the door behind him, locking it out of habit, and stepped into the warmth of the hallway. It smelled faintly of cooking oil and detergent. Familiar, lived in. Lila tilted her head, studying his face. "So?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. He could lie. It would be easy. A simple version of the night. Something safe. But Lila had always had a way of seeing through those kinds of things. It was different, he said finally. She narrowed her eyes slightly. "Different good or different bad?" He let out a quiet breath. "Different complicated." Lila considered that, then nodded like it made perfect sense. "Did you like her?" Marcus paused. I think I was starting to, he said. What happened? He stepped past her, heading toward their apartment door, fishing his keys from his pocket. We had some unexpected company. Like who? He unlocked the door and pushed it open, gesturing for her to go inside first. Mrs. Whitmore, he said. Lila stopped mid-step. The lady from the big house? She asked, her voice rising just a little. That's the one. What was she doing there? That's what I'd like to know. They stepped inside, and Marcus closed the door behind them, flipping on the light. The apartment was small, 2 rooms and a kitchen barely big enough for one person at a time. But it was clean, organized, everything in its place. Lila dropped onto the couch, pulling her knees up under her. What did she say? She asked. Marcus set his keys on the counter and leaned back against it. Crossing his arms, she asked Emily if she knew who I was. Lila frowned. But she did know who you were, apparently not the way Mrs. Whitmore meant it. Lila's brows knit together. That's weird. Yeah, Marcus said. It is. Did you tell her she was being rude? Marcus chuckled softly. No. Why not? He looked at her for a moment, then shrugged slightly. Because sometimes people say things for a reason, even if you don't understand it yet. Lila leaned back against the couch, thinking. So what does she think she knows? She asked. Marcus shook his head slowly. I don't know, and that was the part that bothered him the most. Not the embarrassment, not Emily leaving, but that question, the one that had been planted and left to grow. Lila watched him for a few seconds, then said quietly, You didn't do anything wrong, right? Marcus met her eyes. No, he said. She nodded once, satisfied. Then it doesn't matter what she thinks. Marcus smiled faintly. I wish it were that simple. Lila tilted her head. It is simple. He laughed under his breath. You're getting too wise for your age. I learned from you, she said, a small grin breaking through. Marcus pushed off the counter and walked over, sitting beside her. He pulled her into a side hug, pressing a quick kiss to the top of her head. All right, he said. Time for bed, for real this time. She groaned but didn't argue, sliding off the couch and heading toward her room. Dad? She called, pausing in that doorway. Yeah? If she comes back. That lady. Marcus leaned back, watching her. What about her? Don't let her scare you, Lila said. He smiled. I won't. She disappeared into her room, the door clicking softly behind her. Marcus sat there for a moment longer, the apartment quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Don't let her scare you. He wasn't scared, not exactly, but he was unsettled because Mrs. Whitmore didn't seem like the kind of person who said things without purpose. And that car, he straightened slightly, his eyes shifting toward the window. The curtains were half drawn, leaving a narrow gap where he could see the street below. For a moment, there was nothing, just the empty sidewalk, glistening under the streetlight. Then, headlights. A car rolled slowly past, its engine barely audible. Not the same one. Or maybe it was. Marcus couldn't be sure. The car didn't stop. It didn't slow enough to be obvious. But as it passed, he caught a glimpse of the driver. Just a shadow behind the glass, watching. Then it was gone. Marcus sat back slowly, the unease settling deeper now. This wasn't about a bad date anymore, or a rude comment. Something else was moving, something quiet, something deliberate. And for the first time that night, Marcus felt it clearly. He wasn't just being misunderstood, he was being noticed, and he still had no idea why. Marcus didn't sleep much that night. He lay on the narrow couch, one arm draped over his eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of the building settling around him, pipes ticking behind the walls, a neighbor's TV murmuring through thin plaster. Somewhere down the hall, a door opening and closing, followed by footsteps fading into silence. Normal sounds, comforting even, but not tonight. Tonight every noise felt sharper, every shadow felt like it carried meaning. Around 2 in the morning, he gave up on sleep altogether. He sat up slowly, careful not to make the couch creak too loudly, and ran a hand over his face. His thoughts kept circling back to the same place. The diner, the question, the look in Mrs. Whitmore's eyes, and that car. He stood, walking quietly to the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. The tap sputtered before running steady, the pipes groaning softly. He leaned against the counter, staring out through the thin gap in the curtains. The street was empty now, still, as if nothing had ever happened. Marcus took a sip, letting the cool water settle his nerves. But the feeling didn't go away. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something closer to anticipation, like something had been set in motion, and he was just now starting to feel the first ripple of it. He exhaled slowly, set the glass down, and headed back toward the couch. Tomorrow would come fast, and tomorrow he had work. The morning arrived gray and quiet. Clouds hung low over the city, pressing down like a weight that never quite lifted. The streets were damp from the night before, reflecting pale light as people moved through their routines. Coffee in hand, heads down, minds already somewhere else. Marcus stood outside the community kitchen, keys in hand, unlocking the back door. The building was old, brick worn smooth in places, the metal door scratched from years of use. It wasn't much to look at, but inside, it meant something. Inside, people got to eat. He pushed the door open and stepped into the familiar space. The smell hit him first. Cleaning solution, stale bread, and the faint, lingering scent of last night's soup. Comforting, predictable. He flicked on the lights, one row at a time, the fluorescent bulbs buzzing softly as they came to life. The kitchen stretched out in front of him. Stainless steel counters, large pots stacked neatly, trays drying on racks. This was where things made sense, where actions mattered more than questions. Marcus shrugged off his jacket, hanging it on a hook near the door, and got to work. He moved through the routine without thinking, checking supplies, setting out ingredients, filling pots with water. The rhythm of it grounded him, pulled him out of his thoughts, and into something tangible. By the time the first volunteers arrived, the place was already coming alive. "Morning, Marcus," called out Denise, a woman in her late 50s who had been volunteering there longer than anyone could remember. "Morning," he replied, offering a small smile. She paused, studying him for a moment. "You look tired." "Didn't sleep much," he admitted. She nodded like she understood, without asking more. People here didn't push. They let things come when they were ready. Marcus appreciated that. They worked side by side in comfortable silence for a while, chopping vegetables, setting up trays, preparing for the lunch rush that would come later. Around mid-morning, the first guests began to arrive, a man in a worn coat who always sat near the door, a woman with 2 kids who came every Tuesday, an older gentleman who never spoke, but always nodded politely when Marcus handed him a plate. Marcus moved among them easily, greeting people, offering small smiles, remembering names. This was where he belonged, not in diners with strangers who questioned him, not under the gaze of people who thought they knew something about him. Here, where things were simple, or at least simpler. "Marcus," Denise called from the front. He turned, wiping his hands on a towel. "There's someone asking for you." He frowned slightly. "For me?" She nodded toward the entrance. Marcus stepped out from behind the counter and moved toward the front of the room. At first he didn't see anything unusual. Just the usual mix of people, some sitting, some waiting, some standing off to the side. Then he saw her, Mrs. Whitmore. She stood near the entrance, her coat draped neatly over her arm, her posture as composed as it had been the night before. She looked completely out of place in the worn, crowded room, like a piece from another world that had somehow ended up here. Conversation had quieted again. Not completely, but enough. People noticed her. They noticed the way she carried herself, the way she didn't belong here. And they noticed the way she was looking at Marcus. Directly, unapologetically. Marcus stopped a few feet away from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room seemed to hold its breath again, just like it had in the diner. Then she broke the silence. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was something underneath it now, something tighter. Marcus glanced briefly around the room, aware of the eyes on them. "Not here," he said quietly. She followed his gaze, taking in the space, the people, the noise, the life of it. For the first time, something flickered across her expression. Not discomfort, not quite. Recognition, maybe. Then she nodded once. "Outside," she said. Marcus turned, grabbing his jacket from the hook, and pushed open the back door. The cool air hit him immediately, carrying the faint scent of rain and asphalt. He stepped out into the narrow alley behind the building, waiting as she followed. The door closed behind them with a soft thud, cutting off the noise from inside. For a moment, it was just the two of them, silence stretching between them. Marcus crossed his arms. "What is this about?" he asked. Mrs. Whitmore didn't answer right away. She looked at him carefully, like she was seeing something she hadn't fully recognized before. "You shouldn't have been there last night," she said finally. Marcus frowned. "At the diner? Yes, that's not really your decision to make." Her jaw tightened slightly. "You're putting yourself in situations you don't understand," she said. Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. "I don't understand," he repeated. "You walked up to my table and said something like that in front of everyone. And I'm the one who doesn't understand?" She held his gaze, unflinching. "You think this is about a date?" she asked. Marcus's expression hardened. "Then what is it about?" She took a small step closer, lowering her voice just enough that it felt more personal. "Do you remember a man named Daniel Whitmore?" The name hit him like something distant. Familiar, but out of place. Marcus blinked once, searching his memory. "No," he said slowly. "Should I?" Her eyes sharpened. "You saved his life." Marcus went still. For a second, the world seemed to narrow down to that single statement. "Don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Yes, you do," she replied. And for the first time, there was emotion in her voice, not anger, not judgment, something else, something deeper. 3 years ago, she continued. A car accident, rain, Highway 17. Marcus's breath caught. The memory surfaced. Not clearly, not all at once, but in fragments. Flashing lights, twisted metal, rain hitting the pavement. A man trapped inside a car, a voice calling for help. Marcus's grip tightened on his arms. He started, then stopped. Mrs. Whitmore watched him closely. "You pulled him out," she said, before the fire reached the engine. Marcus swallowed hard. "I just did what anyone would do," he said quietly. "No," she said. Her voice was firm now. "Not anyone." Silence fell between them again. The alley felt smaller somehow, closer. Marcus looked away for a moment, shaking his head slightly. "I didn't even know his name," he said. "I know," she replied. He looked back at her. "And you think that has something to do with last night?" he asked. She held his gaze. "It has everything to do with last night." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. Not physically, but in that quiet, internal way when something you thought was simple suddenly isn't. "What are you saying?" he asked. Mrs. Whitmore hesitated. Just for a second. Then she said, "You were never supposed to meet her." Marcus's brow furrowed. "Meet who?" She didn't answer right away. And in that silence, the question grew louder, because whatever this was, it was bigger than a bad date, bigger than the misunderstanding, and Marcus was only just beginning to see how far it went. "Meet who?" Marcus repeated, his voice lower now, tighter. Mrs. Whitmore didn't answer right away. The alley felt colder than it had a moment ago. A thin breeze slipped between the buildings, carrying the smell of damp concrete and something metallic from the nearby dumpsters. Somewhere down the block, a car door slammed, echoing sharply before fading into silence. Marcus took a step forward. "I think you owe me more than half a sentence," he said. Her eyes didn't waver, for the first time since he had known of her existence. From across fences, across streets, across invisible lines drawn between two worlds, she looked unsettled, not weak, not unsure, but calculating. "You've lived your life quietly," she said instead. "Kept your head down, stayed out of certain circles." Marcus frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It has everything to do with this," she replied. He shook his head. "No, it doesn't. You walked into a diner and embarrassed me in front of a woman I barely knew. Now you're standing here talking like I'm part of something I don't even understand." "Exactly," she said. That word landed harder than anything else she had said. Marcus stared at her. "You don't understand," she continued, her voice steady but edged now. "And that's what makes this dangerous." A quiet tension settled between them. Marcus felt it. Something tightening. Something pulling the situation into a direction he hadn't expected. "Dangerous?" he repeated. "For who? For you?" The answer came quickly. Too quickly. Marcus let out a breath through his nose, a faint, disbelieving smile touching his lips. "I appreciate the concern," he said, "but I think I've managed just fine so far." Mrs. Whitmore stepped closer. Not enough to invade his space, but enough to make the distance feel intentional. "This isn't about managing," she said. "This is about timing." Marcus's patience thinned. "Then maybe you should stop talking in riddles and tell me what you actually mean." For a moment, she didn't respond. Her gaze shifted slightly, past him, toward the back door of the kitchen, where faint voices and movement hinted at the life continuing inside. Then she looked back at him. "You saved my husband," she said. The words were softer now, but they carried more weight than anything before. Marcus blinked. "I already told you. I didn't even know who he was." "I know," she said. "Then why?" "Because he knew who you were." Marcus's confusion deepened. "That doesn't make any sense. It didn't have to," she replied. "Not to you." He stared at her, searching for something solid, something he could hold on to in the middle of all this. "What does that even mean?" he asked. Mrs. Whitmore took a slow breath, as if deciding how much to say. "My husband spent months trying to find you," she said. Marcus froze. "What?" "After the accident," she continued. "After he recovered, he kept asking about the man who pulled him out of that car, the man who disappeared before anyone could get his name." Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. "I didn't disappear," he said quietly. "I left when the paramedics got there." "That's what you're supposed to do. Most people don't leave," she said. "Most people stay. They talk. They make sure they're seen." Marcus shook his head. "That's not why I was there." "I know," she said again. And this time, there was something different in her voice. Not judgment, not suspicion, something closer to acknowledgement. Marcus looked away for a second, processing. "I didn't need to be seen," he said. I just needed to help. The alley fell quiet again. A distant siren wailed somewhere far off, cutting through the stillness before fading into nothing. Mrs. Whitmore studied him in a way she hadn't before. You never came forward, she said. Never contacted anyone, never followed up. Marcus shrugged slightly. It wasn't my place, she nodded once, slowly. That's exactly why he wanted to find you. Marcus looked back at her. And did he? He asked. A pause. Then, no. The word hung between them. Marcus exhaled. Then I guess that's where the story ends. Mrs. Whitmore's expression hardened again. She said, That's where it should have ended. Marcus frowned. But it didn't. The tension crept back in. Stronger now. What happened? Marcus asked. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, Marcus felt it again. That sense that whatever she was holding back wasn't small, that it wasn't simple. That night, she said slowly, changed more than just his life. Marcus's brow furrowed. How? But she didn't answer that. Instead, she looked at him with a new kind of intensity. Do you know what happens when someone like my husband owes his life to someone like you? She asked. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. I don't think it works that way, he said. It does, she replied. Silence, the weight of her words pressed down on him. You became a variable, she said. Marcus let out a short breath. A variable in a world where everything is controlled, planned, accounted for, she explained. You were unexpected. Marcus stared at her. That still doesn't explain the diner, he said. Her gaze sharpened again. The diner, she said, was a mistake. Marcus's stomach dropped slightly. A mistake? Yes. He took a step back, running a hand through his hair. I sat down with someone my friend set me up with, he said. That's not a mistake. That's called living a normal life. You don't have a normal life, she said. The words came out flat, certain. And for the first time, Marcus felt something else rise inside him. Not confusion, not curiosity, anger. Don't tell me what kind of life I have, he said, his voice low but firm. I'm telling you what kind of life you stepped into, she corrected. The alley seemed to close in around them. Marcus could feel his pulse quicken, the calm he had been holding onto starting to crack. And what life is that? He asked. Mrs. Whitmore didn't hesitate this time. My daughter's. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Marcus blinked. Your daughter? Yes. He shook his head slightly. I've never met your daughter. Another pause. Then, yes, she said, you have. Marcus felt the ground shift again, not violently, but enough to make him lose his footing for just a second. When? He asked. Mrs. Whitmore held his gaze, and this time, there was no hesitation. No matter how you see it, she said quietly, last night was never supposed to happen. Marcus's mind raced, pieces just trying to connect, failing to form a clear picture. The diner, the car, the accident, the name, his daughter. None of it lined up. Not yet. But something was there, something just out of reach. What are you not telling me? He asked. Mrs. Whitmore didn't answer, and she stepped back, putting space between them again. This isn't over, she said. Marcus's jaw tightened. I figured that much out already. She turned slightly, preparing to leave. Stay where you are, she added, almost as an afterthought. Marcus let out a short, incredulous laugh. Yeah, he said. That's not going to happen. For a brief moment, something almost like a smile touched her lips, but it didn't stay. It might be the only thing that keeps you safe, she said. Then she walked past him, back toward the street, back toward whatever world she had come from. Marcus stood there, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him, the questions multiplying faster than he could answer them. He didn't move. Not right away, because for the first time since this had started, he realized something. This wasn't just about being noticed. It wasn't just about being misunderstood. It was about being pulled into something he had never asked to be part of. And whatever it was, it had already found him. Marcus didn't move for a long time after Mrs. Whitmore left. The alley felt different now, smaller, tighter, like the walls had shifted just enough to remind him he wasn't alone in it anymore, even when he was. He let out a slow breath, dragging a hand across his face. "My daughter," he muttered under his breath. The words didn't make sense. They didn't fit, not with anything he knew, not with the life he had built, piece by piece, quietly, carefully, after everything had fallen apart. Marcus pushed the back door open and stepped inside the kitchen again. The warmth hit him first, followed by the noise, pots clanking, voices overlapping, the steady rhythm of people working together. It should have grounded him. Usually it did, but now it felt distant, like he had stepped back into something familiar, but wasn't fully part of it anymore. "Everything okay?" Denise asked, glancing over as he walked past. Marcus forced a nod. "Yeah, just needed some air." She studied him for a second longer, then gave a small, knowing hum and went back to stirring a large pot on the stove. Marcus moved to the sink, turning on the faucet harder than necessary. The water rushed out, loud and steady, filling the silence in his head. "My daughter." He stared at his reflection in the small, scratched metal panel above the sink. Tired eyes, tension in his jaw, confusion written across every line of his face. "I've never met her," he said quietly to himself. But even as he said it, something flickered. Not a memory, not exactly, just a feeling. Like a moment he hadn't fully paid attention to at the time, now trying to push its way back into focus. Marcus shut off the water. He grabbed a towel, drying his hands slowly, his mind working through the pieces. 3 years ago, rain, Highway 17, the accident. He had been driving back from a late job, headlights barely cutting through the storm. Traffic had slowed, then stopped. And there it was, twisted metal, smoke rising, people standing too far back, unsure what to do. He hadn't thought. He had just moved. Broken glass. A door that wouldn't open. A man trapped inside. Marcus had pulled him out. That was it. No names, no conversations, no follow-up, just action. And then he had left. So how did that connect to a diner, a blind date, and a woman who claimed he had already met her daughter? "Marcus!" Voice snapped him back. He turned. Denise stood near the front, motioning toward him. "You've got someone else asking for you." Marcus froze. For a second, something cold slid through him. "Who?" he asked. She shrugged. Didn't say, just waiting. Marcus wiped his hands again, slower this time. He walked toward the front of the room, each step feeling heavier than the last. Please don't be her again. But it wasn't. The person standing near the entrance was younger, late 20s, maybe early 30s, dressed in a way that didn't belong in this room. Tailored coat, polished shoes, posture that carried confidence without effort. And yet, there was something different about her. Not cold, like Mrs. Whitmore, not sharp. Something uncertain, like she didn't quite know how to stand here. Marcus stopped a few feet away. She turned, their eyes met, and for a split second, something passed between them. Recognition? No, quite. But close enough to make Marcus's chest tighten. "Marcus Reed?" she asked. Her voice was softer than he expected. Steady, but not guarded. "That's me," he said. She nodded once, like she had just confirmed something important. "I was hoping it was you." Marcus glanced around briefly, aware again of the quiet that had settled over the room. People weren't staring openly, but they were listening, always listening. "Do you want to step outside?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, that would be better. Marcus pushed the door open again, stepping back into the alley. The air had warmed slightly, but the tension hadn't gone anywhere. She followed him out, the door closing softly behind them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Marcus studied her more closely now. She looked familiar, not in a clear, immediate way, but in the way a face lingers at the edge of memory. I'm Charlotte, she said finally. The name hit him, not like a revelation, more like a missing piece sliding into place. Charlotte Whitmore. Marcus exhaled slowly. Your mother was just here, he said. I know. That didn't surprise him. Did she tell you what she said? He asked. Charlotte gave a faint, almost apologetic smile. She tends to make an impression, that's one way to put it. Silence stretched between them again. Marcus crossed his arms. So, he said, are you here to ask me the same question? Charlotte frowned slightly. What question? Do I know who I am? She shook her head immediately. No. Her answer came quick, honest, different. Marcus noticed that. Then why are you here? He asked. Charlotte took a breath, and for the first time since she had stepped into the room, she looked unsure, not of him, of herself. I think, she started, then stopped, choosing her words carefully. I think I owe you something. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Owe me? She nodded. My father, she said. 3 years ago, the accident. Marcus's chest tightened again. You pulled him out of that car, she continued. You saved his life. Marcus shook his head slightly. I didn't save anything, You stayed when no one else did, she said, cutting in gently. Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her this time. There it was again. That feeling, familiar, not from the accident, but from somewhere else. I didn't see you there, he said. Charlotte nodded. You wouldn't have. Why not? Because I wasn't at the crash, Marcus frowned. Then how do you... I saw you later, she said. The words stopped him. Later. She held his gaze. Her expression changed slightly now, less uncertain, more certain, like she had reached the part of the conversation she couldn't avoid anymore. Yes, she said. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. When? He asked. Charlotte took a small step closer, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, but clearer than anything she had said before. Last night. Marcus's breath caught. The alley seemed to go still around them. What? He said. Charlotte didn't look away. I was there, she said, at the diner. Marcus stared at her. That's not possible, he said. I would have seen you. Charlotte shook her head slowly. No, she said. You wouldn't have. Marcus's mind raced, trying to piece it together. The diner, the room, Emily, Mrs. Whitmore, the people around them. He had looked. He had noticed faces. So how... Where were you? He asked. Charlotte's eyes softened slightly. Right behind you, she said. The words landed heavy, too heavy. Marcus felt the moment stretch, and something inside it began to shift. Because if she had been there, if she had seen everything, then this wasn't about coincidence. It never had been. And whatever had started in that diner, it had just taken a very different turn. Marcus stared at her. Right behind me, he repeated. Slower this time, like the words might make more sense if he gave them space. Charlotte nodded. I didn't come in through the front, she said. I was already inside. Corner booth, back wall. Marcus's mind flashed through the layout of the diner. The cracked booths, the dim lights, the way shadows pooled in the corners. There had been people there, plenty of them, but not her. At least, not that he had noticed. You expect me to believe that? He asked. Charlotte didn't flinch. I expect you to remember, she said gently. That caught him off guard. Remember what? The moment, she said. Right before my mother walked in. You looked over your shoulder. Just for a second. Marcus's brow furrowed. I was looking at the door. No, she said quietly. You were looking past it. Silence stretched. Marcus searched his memory again, harder this time. Not just the obvious parts, but the edges, the things he hadn't paid attention to. And there it was, a flicker, a shape in the reflection of the window, a presence he had dismissed without thinking. Not important, not relevant, until now. Marcus exhaled slowly. You were watching me, he said. Charlotte didn't deny it. Thus, the word settled between them, not defensive, not ashamed, just honest. Why? Marcus asked. Charlotte hesitated, and for the first time since she had stepped into the alley, she looked vulnerable. I didn't know it was you at first, she said. Not for sure. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. But you suspected? Yes, based on what? Charlotte glanced away briefly, like she was deciding how much to give him. Then she looked back. My father never stopped talking about the man who saved him, she said. Not in the way you'd expect. Not like a story he told at dinner parties. Marcus stayed quiet. He didn't even know your name, she continued. But he remembered everything else. The way you moved, the way you spoke, the way you didn't wait for anyone else to act. Marcus shifted his weight slightly, the words settling in a way he didn't quite know how to process. That doesn't explain how you recognized me, he said. Charlotte gave a faint, almost sad smile. It doesn't, she admitted. Not on its own. She took a small breath. But I've been looking. Marcus's expression hardened just a fraction. Looking? He repeated. For you, she said. The alley seemed to go quiet again. Why? He asked. Charlotte met his gaze. Because my father asked me to. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. And you do everything your father asks? He said. There was no bite in his tone, just a question. Charlotte shook her head slightly. No, she said. But this was different. How? She held his gaze for a moment longer, because he wasn't asking for himself. That landed deeper than Marcus expected. He looked away briefly, his eyes dropping to the damp pavement beneath his feet. And what, he said slowly, was he asking for? Charlotte didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket. Marcus tensed slightly, instinctively alert, but she only pulled out a small, worn photograph. She held it out to him. Marcus hesitated, then took it. The edges were soft, slightly bent from being handled too many times. It showed a hospital room, a man in a bed, pale, bandaged, but alive, and beside him, a younger version of Charlotte. Marcus looked closer. There in the corner of the frame, barely visible, a figure, blurry, moving, his stomach dropped. That's, he started. You, Charlotte said. Marcus stared at the photo. He didn't remember anyone taking it. Didn't remember standing there long enough to be captured in anything. But there he was. Proof. I left, he said quietly. I didn't stay for this. You didn't, she agreed. That was taken seconds before you walked out. Marcus looked up at her. And you've been carrying that around? Charlotte nodded. For 3 years, the weight of that settled heavily between them. Marcus handed the photo back, slower than he had taken it. And you thought a diner was the place to finally… What? Confirm it? He asked. Charlotte shook her head. No, she said. The diner wasn't planned. Then what was? She hesitated again. And this time, the hesitation felt different. Less about protecting information, more about choosing the right moment. My mother, she said finally. She saw you first. Marcus let out a quiet breath. Of course she did. She didn't know for sure either, Charlotte continued. But she recognized something. Marcus's jaw tightened. She recognized enough to walk in and do what she did. Yes, silence. Marcus shook his head slightly. That wasn't her place. No, Charlotte agreed. It wasn't. He looked at her, surprised. She held his gaze, steady. But she thought she was protecting something, Charlotte added. Marcus let out a short, dry laugh. Protecting what? Charlotte didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a small step closer. Close enough now that Marcus could see the faint tension in her expression. The way she was holding something back, not out of control, but out of timing. She said. The word hung there, simple, heavy. Marcus stared at her. From me? He asked. Charlotte nodded once. Yes, Marcus shook his head again, slower this time. You don't even know me. Charlotte's expression softened. I know enough. That's not the same thing. No, she agreed. It's not. Another pause. Longer now, the kind that stretches until something has to give. Marcus ran a hand over his face. So let me get this straight, he said. Your father's been looking for me for 3 years. You've been looking for me. Your mother finds me first, decides I'm a threat. And now you're here, what? To finish the conversation she started? Charlotte didn't react to the edge in his voice. I'm here, she said, because I saw something last night. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What? She held his gaze. The way you handled it. He frowned. Handled what, my mother? She said. The situation, the way everything shifted around you, and you didn't. Marcus let out a breath, shaking his head. I didn't do anything. Exactly, she said. That caught him again. What's that supposed to mean? Charlotte's voice softened. It means you didn't try to prove anything, she said. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't fight for how you were seen. Marcus looked away. That doesn't mean anything, he muttered. It means everything, she replied. Silence. Marcus felt it again. That shift. Not just confusion now, something else, something quieter, more personal. Why does that matter to you? He asked. Charlotte didn't hesitate this time, because people who don't need to prove who they are, she said slowly, usually already know. Marcus let that sit for a moment, then he looked back at her. And what do you think I know? He asked. Charlotte met his eyes, and for the first time since this started, there was no hesitation in her answer. I think you know exactly who you are, she said. The alley fell silent again, but this time, the silence felt different. Not empty, not tense, something else, something building. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what came next. And Marcus had a feeling he was about to find out. The alley seemed quieter than before. Not empty, just waiting. Marcus shifted his weight, folding his arms loosely, though the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. Charlotte stood in front of him, calm but focused, like someone who had already crossed a line and wasn't planning to step back. What comes next? Marcus asked. Charlotte didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced past him toward the kitchen door, the faint sound of plates and voices leaking through the metal. Then she looked back at him, her expression tightening just slightly, like she was about to say something that mattered more than anything before. My father's not the kind of man who lets things go, she said. Marcus frowned. I figured that much. He doesn't forget debts, she continued, especially not the ones he can't repay. Marcus let out a slow breath. I didn't do it for a debt, he said. I didn't even know who he was. I know, Charlotte replied. That's exactly why it stayed with him. Marcus shook his head slightly. Then tell him to let it go. Charlotte's eyes held his. He tried. That answer caught him off guard. Tried? Marcus repeated. She nodded. For a while, and then what? Charlotte hesitated again. And Marcus felt it. The shift. The conversation wasn't just about gratitude anymore. There was something else beneath it, something unfinished. He got worse, she said quietly. Marcus's expression changed. What do you mean, worse? Charlotte looked down briefly, then back up. The accident didn't just leave scars you could see, she said. There were complications. Recovery wasn't clean. Marcus listened, something in his chest tightening. He couldn't work the way he used to, she continued. Couldn't move the same way. Couldn't think the same way some days. Marcus exhaled slowly. I'm sorry, he said. Charlotte gave a small nod. He built everything he had from control, she said, from knowing exactly how things would unfold. And then one moment, one accident, took that away. Marcus didn't say anything, because he understood that. Maybe not in the same way, but he understood loss. He understood what it meant to have something solid suddenly disappear. He kept asking about you, Charlotte said, not just because you saved him, but because you didn't stay. Marcus looked at her again. That's not something special, he said. It just means I left. No, she said. It means you didn't need anything from him. The words lingered. Marcus looked away, rubbing his hands together slightly, more out of habit than cold. I didn't even think about it, he said. I saw someone who needed help. That was it. Charlotte stepped closer again, and that's exactly what he couldn't understand. Marcus frowned. Why? Because in his world, she said, everything has a reason, a transaction, a return. Marcus let out a quiet breath. Well, my world doesn't work like that. I know, she said. Silence settled between them again, not heavy, just full. Marcus leaned back against the wall, looking at her more carefully now. So what does any of this have to do with me now? He asked. 3 years later, Charlotte didn't hesitate this time, because he's still looking for a way to repay something that can't be repaid. Marcus shook his head. Then he's wasting his time, no, she said softly. He's trying to understand it. Marcus looked at her. And you? He asked. What are you trying to do? Charlotte held his gaze. I'm trying to see if he was right. About what? She took a breath. That people like you still exist. The words landed quietly, but they carried weight. Marcus felt something shift again. Not sharp, not jarring, just enough to make him look at her differently. People like me? He repeated. Charlotte nodded. People who don't need recognition, she said, who don't need anything back. Marcus let out a small, tired laugh. You make it sound like that's rare. It is, she said simply. He studied her for a moment. You don't believe that, he said. Charlotte tilted her head slightly. Why not? Because you're here, he replied. That stopped her. Marcus pushed off the wall, taking a step closer now. You came here, he said. You walked into a place you don't belong, talked to people you don't know, just to find someone who didn't ask for anything in return. Charlotte didn't speak. Sounds like you already know people like that exist, Marcus added. For a moment, her expression softened. Then it tightened again. It's not that simple, she said. It never is, Marcus replied. The alley fell quiet again. Somewhere above them, a window slid open, then shut again. A faint breeze moved through, carrying the distant hum of traffic. Marcus glanced toward the street. You said last night wasn't supposed to happen, he said. Why? Charlotte hesitated, and this time, the hesitation felt heavier, more deliberate, because, she said slowly, you weren't supposed to be visible. Marcus turned back to her. Visible? He echoed. She nodded. In my world, she said, people like you don't just appear out of nowhere. Marcus frowned. I've been here the whole time. Yes, she said, but not to us. Marcus crossed his arms again. And now I am? Charlotte met his gaze. Yes. Silence stretched. Marcus felt it again. That sense of being pulled into something he hadn't asked for. Something bigger, something structured. "And what happens now that I am?" he asked. Charlotte didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him. Really looked at him. Like she was measuring something she hadn't fully understood yet. "Now," she said quietly, "things start to change." Marcus let out a slow breath. "I didn't ask for anything to change. I know," she said. "That doesn't stop it," she added. Marcus looked past her, toward the open end of the alley, where the street waited beyond. Cars passed, people moved, life went on, unaware, unaffected. He turned back to her. "I have a life," he said. "A simple one. And I'd like to keep it that way." Charlotte's expression softened again. "I don't think that's an option anymore," she said. Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's not your decision." "No," she agreed. "It's not." Another pause. Then, "It's already in motion." Marcus felt something settle in his chest. Not panic, not fear, just acceptance. The kind that comes when you realize something is coming whether you're ready or not. He looked at her one more time. "And if I walk away?" he asked. Charlotte held his gaze. "Then it will follow you." The words hung in the air, clear, certain. Marcus nodded slowly. Then he looked down the alley again, at the narrow path, at the light beyond it, at the life he had been living just hours before this all began. And for the first time, he understood something. This wasn't about being dragged into something new. It was about something that had already been tied to him, long before he even noticed. And now, it was catching up. Marcus exhaled. Then he said quietly, "Then I guess I don't get to walk away." Charlotte didn't respond, but the look in her eyes said enough. No, he didn't. And whatever came next, it wasn't going to wait. Marcus stood there a moment longer, letting the weight of that settle. Then he nodded once, more to himself than to her. "All right," he said quietly. "Then we don't wait." Charlotte studied him, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. "What does that mean?" she asked. Marcus looked toward the street again, then back at her. "It means if something's already moving," he said, "I'd rather see it coming than pretend it's not there." For the first time, a faint trace of something like respect crossed her expression. "That's not how most people react," she said. Marcus shrugged lightly. "Most people haven't had their life fall apart before," he replied. That landed. Charlotte didn't respond right away, but the silence between them shifted, less tense now, more grounded. Marcus pushed himself off the wall fully. "So what happens now?" he asked. Charlotte hesitated. Then she reached into her coat again. But this time, instead of a photograph, she pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward him. Marcus leaned in slightly. It was a message thread. Dozens of unread notifications, emails, calls, alerts, all tied to one name, Daniel Whitmore. Marcus straightened. "That's your father?" he asked. Charlotte nodded. "He's been asking for updates," she said. "About you." Marcus let out a slow breath. "About me," he repeated. "About whether you're who we think you are." Marcus frowned. "And what exactly do you think I am?" Charlotte locked her phone and lowered it. "That's what we're trying to figure out," she said. Marcus shook his head slightly. "You already know," he said. "I'm the guy who pulled him out of a car and walked away." "That's the story," she said. Marcus met her eyes. "And what's the version you're looking for?" Charlotte didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced down the alley again, as if checking something Marcus couldn't see. Then she stepped closer, her voice lowering. "My father doesn't just want to thank you," she said. Marcus's jaw tightened. "I told you, I don't need anything. I know," she said. "That's the problem." Marcus let out a quiet breath. You keep saying that like it's a bad thing. In our world it is, she replied. Marcus shook his head again. Well, I'm not part of your world. Charlotte held his gaze. That's what you think. Marcus didn't respond, because something in the way she said it didn't feel like an argument. It felt like a warning. A faint sound broke the moment. The soft crunch of tires on gravel. Both of them turned. At the far end of the alley, a black SUV had pulled in halfway, its engine idling low. Marcus's chest tightened slightly. Same kind of car, same quiet presence. Not hiding, not exactly. Just there. Charlotte's expression changed immediately, subtle, but Marcus saw it. That's not mine, she said. I didn't think it was. Marcus replied. The SUV didn't move closer. It didn't honk. It didn't do anything. Just sat there, waiting. Marcus crossed his arms again, his stance shifting slightly, less uncertain now, more grounded. You expecting them? He asked. Charlotte shook her head. No, then who are they? She didn't answer, and that silence said enough. Marcus exhaled slowly. So this is what you meant, he said. Charlotte looked back at him. Yes, the word came out softer this time. More real. Marcus nodded once. All right, he said. Then I'm done standing in alleys talking about it. He turned slightly, angling his body toward the street. Charlotte blinked. What are you doing? Marcus looked back at her. If someone's going to watch me, he said, they can do it where I can see them. Charlotte's eyes widened just a fraction. That's not a good idea. Marcus gave a small, tired smile. Neither is pretending this isn't happening. He stepped forward, out of the shadow of the alley, into the open. The light from the street hit him differently, brighter, clearer, exposing everything that had been hidden in the narrow space behind him. Charlotte hesitated for a second, then followed. The SUV's engine shifted slightly as they approached. Marcus didn't slow down, didn't stop. He walked straight toward it, his steps steady, his shoulders squared. Every instinct told him to be cautious, to hang back, to let things unfold at a distance. But something deeper pushed him forward. Not recklessness, not pride, just certainty. If this was coming into his life, he wasn't going to meet it halfway. He was going to face it. Head on. They stopped a few feet from the vehicle. The tinted window reflected them back. Two figures standing in the open, framed by the dull gray of the street and the faint hum of the city beyond. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the window rolled down, slow, deliberate. Held his ground. Inside, a man in a dark suit sat behind the wheel, clean-cut, composed. Watching, not surprised, not rushed. Just waiting. Mr. Reed, the man said calmly. Marcus didn't react to the name. Yeah, he said. The man gave a slight nod. We've been trying to reach you. Marcus let out a quiet breath. Funny, he said. I don't remember giving anyone my number. A faint smile touched the man's lips. You didn't, he replied. Marcus glanced at Charlotte briefly. She didn't look surprised, just tense. What do you want? Marcus asked. The man's expression didn't change. Mr. Whitmore would like to meet you, he said. There it was, simple, direct. Marcus felt the weight of it settle, the moment he had been circling since the diner, since the alley, since everything started to shift. He looked at Charlotte again. This time her expression was different, not uncertain, not hesitant, just waiting, like she already knew what his answer would be. Marcus turned back to the man in the car. And if I say no? He asked. The man didn't hesitate. That's your choice, he said. A beat. Then, but I don't think it's one you'll make. Marcus studied him for a second longer. Then he exhaled. Slow, steady. Because deep down, he already knew this wasn't something he could step away from, not anymore. Not after everything. Marcus nodded once. All right, he said. I'll meet him. The man's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted, like a door had just opened, and Marcus, for better or worse, had just stepped through it. The SUV door opened with a soft, almost silent click. The man inside didn't rush Marcus. He didn't gesture impatiently or check his watch. He simply waited, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other lightly gripping the edge of the door. Charlotte stood still beside Marcus. You don't have to go right now, she said quietly. Marcus glanced at her. It was the first time since they'd stepped out of the alley that her voice carried hesitation again. Not fear, but something close to concern. He looked back at the car. If I don't, he said, they'll just come back. Charlotte didn't argue because she knew he was right. Marcus stepped forward and got into the back seat. The door closed behind him with a muted thud that felt heavier than it should have. The kind of sound that didn't just shut something, it separated one moment from the next. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something clean, almost sterile. No clutter, no distractions. Just quiet. Charlotte hesitated outside for half a second. Then she got in on the other side. The driver didn't speak. He simply shifted the car into gear, and they moved. The city changed slowly at first. Marcus watched through the tinted window as familiar streets passed by. The worn sidewalks, the flickering signs, the small stores with metal grates half pulled down. Then, block by block, it shifted. The streets widened, the buildings stood taller, cleaner, the lights grew steadier, brighter. The kind of places Marcus only passed through, never stayed in. He leaned back slightly, his eyes tracking the change. You do this often? He asked, his voice low but steady. Charlotte looked over at him. Pick people up? She asked. No, Marcus said. Pull them out of their life without warning. Charlotte didn't smile. No, she said. Not like this. Marcus nodded once. At least that was something. The car turned onto a quieter street lined with trees. Large houses sat back from the road, hidden behind gates and long driveways. Everything felt controlled, ordered. Nothing out of place. Marcus felt it immediately. This wasn't just another part of the city. This was a different world. The SUV slowed, then turned, through an open gate. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly as they pulled up a long driveway, the tires crunching softly over gravel. The house at the end wasn't just large. It was deliberate. Every line, every light, every detail placed with intention. The car came to a stop. For a moment, no one moved. Then the driver stepped out, walking around to open Marcus's door. Marcus hesitated, just for a second. Then he stepped out. The air here felt different. Quieter, still. Like the world had decided to pause at the edge of this place. Charlotte stepped out on the other side. You okay? She asked. Marcus glanced at her. I've been worse, he said. That earned the smallest hint of a smile. They walked toward the front of the house. Each step felt measured, not because Marcus was afraid, but because everything about this place reminded him he didn't belong here. And yet, he was here anyway. The front door opened before they reached it. A man stood inside, older than Marcus expected, mid-60s maybe. His posture was straight, but not rigid. His expression calm. But there was something beneath it, something that had been worn down, reshaped, rebuilt. This was Daniel Whitmore. Marcus knew it without being told. The man studied him, not quickly, not casually, but with the kind of focus that felt personal. Marcus Reed, he said. His voice was steady, but not cold. Marcus nodded. Yeah, a pause. Then, come in. Marcus stepped inside. The house was quiet. Not empty, but controlled. The kind of quiet that didn't come from absence, but from intention. They moved into the sitting room. Large windows, soft lighting, furniture that looked like it had never been used carelessly. Daniel Whitmore didn't sit right away. He turned to face Marcus. Up close, the details were clearer. The faint stiffness in his movement, the slight delay in how he shifted his weight. The accident had left its mark. Marcus saw it immediately. Daniel noticed that. A small flicker in his eyes. "You see it?" he said. Marcus didn't pretend otherwise. "Yeah," he said. Daniel nodded once. "Good." That wasn't the response Marcus expected. Silence stretched between them. Charlotte stayed near the doorway, watching, not interrupting, not guiding, just there. Daniel finally gestured toward a chair, and she said. Marcus didn't argue. He sat. But he didn't relax. Daniel remained standing for another moment, then slowly lowered himself into the chair across from him. For a few seconds, nothing. Just two men sitting across from each other. One who had lost control, one who had never had it. Then Daniel spoke. "I've been looking for you," he said. Marcus nodded slightly. "So I've heard." Daniel's eyes didn't leave him. "I thought about that night more times than I can count," he continued. "Every detail, every second." Marcus said nothing. "Most people freeze," Daniel said. "Or they wait. Or they assume someone else will act." Marcus shifted slightly in his seat. "I didn't think about it like that," he said. Daniel leaned forward just a fraction. "That's exactly the point." The room felt smaller now, more focused. "You didn't calculate," Daniel said. "You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask what you'd get out of it." Marcus met his gaze. "No," he said. Daniel studied him for a moment longer. Then he nodded. "Good." Marcus frowned slightly. "That's twice now," he said. "You've said that." Daniel leaned back. "Because it matters," he replied. Silence again. But this time, it carried something else. Expectation. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Look," he said. "I didn't come here for anything. I don't need anything. Whatever you think you owe me, just let it go." Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked down at his hands, then back up. "I can't," he said. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Why not?" Daniel's voice didn't rise, didn't harden, it just stayed steady. "Because you didn't just save my life," he said. Marcus frowned. "Yes, I did," he replied. "That's exactly what I did." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No," he said. He leaned forward again, and this time, there was no hesitation in his voice. "You gave me something I didn't have before." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "What?" Daniel held his gaze. "A reason to question everything I thought I understood." The words landed quietly, but they changed the air in the room. Marcus didn't respond right away, because for the first time since this started, he realized this wasn't about repayment, not really. This was about something deeper, something Daniel Whitmore hadn't figured out yet. And somehow, Marcus was part of that answer. Daniel sat back again, then he said, "I don't want to pay you back." Marcus's brow furrowed. "Then what do you want?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "I want to understand you." The room went still, because that was something Marcus hadn't expected. Not money, not favors, not a transaction. Understanding. Marcus let out a slow breath. "That's not something you can buy," he said. Daniel nodded. "I know." A pause. Then, "That's why you're here." Marcus looked at him. Really looked at him this time. And for the first time since stepping into this house, he felt something shift. Not tension, not pressure. Something else. Something quieter. More dangerous in its own way. Because this wasn't about what Marcus could take. It was about what he represented. And whether he even realized it. Marcus leaned back slightly. Then he said, "You're asking the wrong person." Daniel's eyes sharpened. No, he said. I'm asking the only one who didn't need an answer. And just like that, Marcus understood something. This wasn't going to be a simple conversation. It wasn't going to end with a handshake and a thank you. Whatever this was, it had just begun. The room held that silence a little longer. Not awkward, not empty, but loaded. Marcus sat there watching Daniel Whitmore, trying to understand what kind of man asked for understanding instead of repayment. It didn't fit the picture he had built in his head, not of someone with this kind of house, this kind of power. Understanding goes both ways, Marcus said finally. Daniel gave a small nod. That's why you're here, he replied. Marcus leaned back slightly in his chair, his hands resting loosely on his knees. He didn't feel out of control, but he didn't feel in control either. It was something in between, a place where you had to choose every word carefully. You said I gave you something, Marcus continued, something you didn't have before. Daniel didn't interrupt. What exactly do you think that was? Marcus asked. Daniel took a slow breath, like he had asked himself that same question more times than he could count. I built everything in my life on one idea, he said, that if you plan well enough, control enough variables, you can predict outcomes. Marcus listened. Right, Daniel continued. You broke that idea. Marcus frowned slightly. I didn't do anything special. That's exactly what makes it special, Daniel replied. Marcus exhaled quietly. That's not an answer, he said. Daniel leaned forward again, resting his hands together. You acted without hesitation, he said, without incentive, without calculation. In a moment where everything around you was chaos, you were certain. Marcus shook his head slightly. I wasn't certain, he said. I just didn't stop. Daniel's eyes sharpened. Exactly. The word landed again. Marcus let it sit for a moment, then looked away toward the large window behind Daniel. The glass reflected the room back at him. Two men sitting across from each other, separated by more than just distance. You keep turning something simple into something complicated, Marcus said. Daniel didn't deny it, because simple things are usually the ones people misunderstand the most, he said. Marcus let out a faint breath. Or maybe, he said, you're just not used to simple. That hit, not hard, but enough. Daniel leaned back slightly, considering him. No, he said after a moment. I'm not. Silence again. Charlotte shifted slightly near the doorway, but she didn't step in, she didn't interrupt. She was watching both of them, waiting. Marcus looked back at Daniel. So what happens now? He asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied Marcus again. This time not like he was analyzing him, but like he was weighing something. Then he said, I want you to come back. Marcus blinked once. Come back? Yes. For what? Daniel didn't hesitate. To show me how you see the world. Marcus stared at him. That's not something I can show you, he said. Then help me understand it, Daniel replied. Marcus let out a quiet laugh. You think I've got some kind of answer you're missing? Daniel's voice stayed steady. I think you have something I don't. Marcus shook his head. No, he said. I just live my life. That's exactly what I want to understand, Daniel said. The room fell quiet again. Marcus felt the weight of the request settle. This wasn't a job. It wasn't a favor. It wasn't even a transaction. It was something else. Something harder to define. You're asking me to change your life, Marcus said slowly. Daniel shook his head. No, he replied. I'm asking you not to. Marcus frowned. That doesn't make sense. It does, Daniel said. I don't want you to become part of my world. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want? Daniel met his gaze. I want to see if my world can survive being part of yours. That shifted everything. Marcus felt it immediately. This wasn't about pulling him into wealth or lifting him out of his life. It was about something more dangerous, more complicated, because it meant letting two completely different realities collide. Marcus leaned back again, letting that idea settle. "That's not something you can control," he said. Daniel gave a small nod. "I know, and you're okay with that?" Another pause. Then, "I don't know," Daniel admitted. The honesty caught Marcus off guard. For the first time since walking into this house, Daniel Whitmore didn't sound like a man who had all the answers. He sounded like someone trying to find one. Marcus glanced toward Charlotte. She was watching him now, not her father. Him, waiting, not for him to agree, but for him to decide. Marcus looked back at Daniel. "I've got a daughter," he said. Daniel nodded. "I know." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. "How?" Charlotte spoke this time. "I looked into you," she said. Marcus didn't react. He had expected that. "You don't bring her into this," Marcus said firmly. Daniel's expression didn't change. "She's already part of your world," he said. "That's my point." Silence. Marcus held his gaze. "If I even consider this," he said, "it doesn't touch her, not directly, not indirectly. Nothing changes for her." Daniel didn't hesitate. Agreed. Marcus watched him closely. People like Daniel Whitmore didn't make agreements lightly, and they didn't break them casually either. Marcus nodded once. "Then maybe we talk," he said. "Not yes, not no. Just a step." Daniel accepted it. "That's all I'm asking," he said. The tension in the room shifted again. Not gone, but different. Less like a standoff, more like the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. Marcus stood. He wasn't ready to stay longer. Not yet. Daniel didn't stop him. "Same time tomorrow," Daniel said. Marcus paused near the door. He looked back once. At the man sitting in the chair. At the house that felt like a different world. At the conversation that had just started something neither of them could undo. Then he said, "We'll see." And he walked out. Charlotte followed him into their hallway. They didn't speak right away. The air outside felt colder now, sharper. Marcus took a breath, steadying himself. "You trust him?" Charlotte asked. Marcus glanced at her. "No," he said. She nodded. "Good." That surprised him. Marcus looked ahead, toward the driveway, toward the world he knew. "And you?" he asked. "Do you trust him?" Charlotte hesitated. Then she said, "I trust what he's trying to do." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed. "It's not." They reached the car again. The driver was already waiting. Everything was already in motion. Marcus looked back once more at the house. Then he got in. Because whether he liked it or not, he had just stepped into something that wasn't going to let him stay the same, and deep down, he knew it. The ride back felt longer than it should have. Marcus sat in the back of the SUV, watching the city unfold in reverse. The clean streets faded into quieter blocks, then into the worn edges of neighborhoods that felt more familiar. Streetlights flickered. Storefronts dimmed. The world he knew slowly returned, but it didn't feel the same. He rested his elbow against the window, fingers lightly touching the cool glass. His reflection stared back at him, tired, thoughtful, changed in a way he couldn't quite explain yet. Across from him, Charlotte sat in silence, not the heavy kind, not the tense kind, just quiet, the kind that let things settle. "You didn't say yes," she said finally. Marcus didn't look at her. "I didn't say no either. That's not the same thing." "No," he agreed. "It's not." The car slowed at a red light. A man crossed the street in front of them, pulling his coat tighter against the wind. A couple stood on the corner arguing quietly, their voices lost behind the glass. Life moved on, unaffected. Marcus watched it all, then leaned back slightly. "You really think this is going to work?" he asked. Charlotte turned toward him. "I don't know," she said honestly. Marcus nodded once. "That's the first real answer I've heard all day." A faint smile touched her lips. Then maybe we're making progress. The light turned green. The car moved again. They didn't speak for the rest of the ride. The SUV pulled up in front of Marcus's building. Same cracked steps, same flickering light above the door, same quiet sense of a place that didn't pretend to be anything more than it was. The driver stepped out, opening the door for him. Marcus paused before getting out. He glanced at Charlotte. "You don't have to come back here," he said. She tilted her head slightly. "You think I don't belong?" Marcus gave a small shrug. "I think you don't need to." Charlotte held his gaze. "That's not the same thing." Marcus didn't argue, because she was right. He stepped out. The cool air hit him again, sharper now than it had been earlier. Or maybe it just felt that way. Charlotte got out after him. The driver didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Everything about him said the same thing. "We'll be back." Marcus stood at the base of the steps, looking up at his building. For a second, he didn't move. Then he climbed. Charlotte followed a few steps behind. Inside, the hallway was quiet, the same dim yellow light, the same faint hum of electricity running through old wiring. Marcus reached his door, pulling out his keys. He stopped, listened. Nothing, just silence. He unlocked the door slowly and stepped inside. The apartment was dark, still. Lila's door was closed. Marcus exhaled quietly, tension easing just a fraction. "She's asleep?" Charlotte asked softly. "Yeah," Marcus said. "She should be." He stepped in fully, leaving the door open just enough for Charlotte to follow. She'd hesitated at the threshold, not because she was unsure, but because she understood. This wasn't her world, not like this. Still, she stepped in. The apartment felt smaller with her in it, not cramped, just more real. Marcus moved toward the kitchen, flicking on a light. The space came alive in warm tones, simple, clean, lived in. Charlotte looked around, not judging, not analyzing, just observing. "You take care of things," she said. Marcus shrugged. "I fix what I can." She nodded slowly. "That's consistent." Marcus gave a faint smile. "You keep looking for patterns," he said. "That's how I make sense of things. And does it help? Sometimes." Silence settled again. Marcus leaned against the counter. "You should go," he said after a moment. Charlotte looked at him. "You sure?" He nodded. "Yeah, I've got a long day tomorrow." She studied him for a second longer. Then she stepped back toward the door. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said. Marcus didn't answer right away. He thought about it, about everything that had happened, about everything that was coming. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he said, "tomorrow." Charlotte gave a small, almost relieved smile. Then she left. The door closed softly behind her. Marcus stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet. Then he moved through the apartment slowly, checking things out of habit. Kitchen, window, locks. Finally, he paused outside Lila's room. He pushed the door open just enough to look inside. She was asleep, curled up under her blanket, one arm hanging off the side of the bed, breathing slow and steady. Marcus watched her for a moment. Then he stepped in quietly, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. She stirred slightly. "Dad?" she murmured, half asleep. "I'm here," he said softly. "You okay?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said, a pause. Then, "Did she come back?" Marcus hesitated, not because he didn't want to answer, but because he wasn't sure how. "Yeah," he said finally. "She did." Lila's eyes stayed closed. What did she want? Marcus looked down at her, at the one thing in his life that had never been complicated. "They want to understand something," he said quietly. Lila shifted slightly. "About you?" "Yeah," another pause. Then, "Do you know the answer?" Marcus let out a soft breath. "I think I do," he said. Then why do they need you? He smiled. Because they don't. Lila didn't respond. She had already drifted back to sleep. Marcus stood there for another moment. Then he stepped back out, closing the door gently behind him. He returned to the living room, sitting down on the couch, the same couch he had tried to sleep on the night before. But this time, sleep didn't feel like the answer. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Everything had changed, not all at once, not loudly, but enough. And tomorrow, it would continue. Marcus leaned back slowly, closing his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them again, because one thing was clear now. This wasn't about what Daniel Whitmore wanted, or what Charlotte was searching for. It wasn't even about the past. It was about what happened next, and whether Marcus was going to let it change him, or remind him of who he already was. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street. The same quiet hum, the same presence, still watching. Marcus glanced toward the window, then back to the room. He didn't feel unsettled this time. He felt ready. Because whatever this was, he wasn't going to run from it. Not anymore. Because in the end, it wasn't the black SUV, the mansion, or Daniel Whitmore that defined Marcus Reed. It was the moment he walked out of that alley and chose to face it all, without asking for anything in return. Sometimes, the people who change lives the most are the ones who never stay to be thanked. And the world struggles to understand that kind of quiet strength. A single act, done without expectation, can echo far beyond the moment, even into places you never intended to reach. So next time you see someone who needs help, don't overthink it. Just show up, like Marcus did, because you never know whose life you're stepping into, or how far that moment might travel. If this story stayed with you, comment 1 below. And tell me, have you ever done something kind for someone and walked away without looking back? Because in the next story, someone doesn't walk away, and what happens after will change everything.